Hi, my name is Aki Kumar. I play the blues harmonica in San Jose, California, and you're listening to Talking Blues.
I get the impression that your parents had a lot to do with your loving music. Tell me how that came about.
Yes, they love to listen to music, they love to consume music. None of them are musicians or ever aspire to be, but my father loved to, he had a very meager salary and he would buy two records a year, that kind of thing. And they were wonderful records, classical music, um, whatever, maybe have pop music, Indian classical music, maybe folk music, um, and my mom loved to sing. She loved to sing, especially really classic Bollywood, retro Bollywood songs, 50s and 60s. I think from her era because they're slightly older than the parents of my peers. So they were really they came of age in that era, and so they used to sing those songs. My dad wasn't a singer, my mom was, and again, not professionals, just hobbyists or lovers of music.
Right.
So I grew up around music, and I remember waking up and music being in the air, whatever it was that my dad was playing that morning, right? And so I look back at that and I tend to believe that that is what gave me my earliest love for music.
And what would have been the earliest love? Like, what would you have been listening to?
I I can't remember. I don't have a memory of this, but I have memories of my mom saying that I used to like the Cassius Clay song, which is the Muhammad Ali, uh, of flies like Superman, stings like a bee.
Right, right.
This is an old song, even for my era. Like I'm in an '80s kid, and this is much older than that. And I used to listen to that and dance to that. There's, I believe, an Afro-Caribbean group, OCBisa, and I used to like that stuff when I was very young. Again, I don't have memories of this, so this is what was told to me, right? So that's the kind of stuff I think got me started. And in the Indian classical realm, although I never ever professed to be any kind of an expert in Indian classic because I didn't really train that in a true sense. I did listen to a lot of it when I was young. So guys like Pandit Jasraj, Bhimsen Joshi, my dad used to listen to this kind of music, and so that was always around, in the air.
And you took some music lessons when you were young.
Yes, for about a year we had a music teacher in our school, and he taught us the fundamentals of certain Indian rhythms and a few Indian ragas. And this was for the classroom, so I really remember a lot of that stuff because it really had a big impact on me and set me in this path on this path for eventual music making in my adulthood because I felt like I understood those concepts, just didn't have the chance to pursue them in a serious way. Uh,
But
yes.
you didn't pursue them at a young age. And music came much, much later. I mean, playing music. Tell me about that.
So I did have one thing when I was a teenager, which was a small Casio keyboard. Okay, and this was like a hand-me-down kind of a gift that had come my way. And so I did have that, and I dabbled in that, and I knew what to do with making notes. I didn't know about chords, but I kind of knew that there were chords because I could hear them in all the music I was listening to. I didn't know what harmonies were, but I could sing harmonies, right? So the official terminology kind of wasn't there, but I knew the concepts. But it wasn't until I was in my 20s here in the US with a little bit of money in my pocket to be able to pay for actual lessons. That's when I started pursuing it. And I found a really good teacher here in San Jose who still teaches, although not in person. He teaches online only these days. His name is David Barrett. He's one of the best blues harmonica teachers, especially you could ask for. And I was very lucky I found him in my backyard, literally. So I went to him every month for one lesson, and I took everything he was saying and kind of just absorbed the heck out of it.
I want to go back to you just enjoying music. As you're growing up, you might have dabbled in it, but you never had any thoughts of becoming a musician at that point. Am I
I
correct?
didn't have any hopes of it. In India, you have thoughts of wanting to do everything, but unless you're from an elite socioeconomic status, you don't get to pursue it. So sports, for instance, is out. You can never be an athlete unless you have all of the resources, or at least I'm talking about my era, right? I mean,
Right.
maybe things have changed in a marginal way, and I'm sure they have. But I couldn't have been an athlete if I wanted to. That would have been delusional. And being a musician itself, it's a huge resource and risk-heavy enterprise. So you never consider that. You're gonna stick to the basics, doctor or engineer. So yeah.
It's interesting that you say that because maybe in North America, it's different, that a lot of people might see the arts or sports as a way of getting out of their socioeconomic state. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yes, but
And
the economics of it are much different in the US or in the West compared
right,
to India. So just the simple fact that I can play gigs, I've been performing in clubs, in restaurants, in different event spaces constantly. That didn't used to exist in India. You couldn't have that life, right? So
okay.
you were either a megastar or you were a nobody, and the risk of trying to be a megastar is so huge that all middle class parents would dissuade you from pursuing that.
Okay, so you decided, if I'm not mistaken, to pursue computer science. I don't know how you got into that, but you decided to pursue it in such a way that you would go to the States and get your education in computer science. How did
Yes.
that come about?
It was the thing in the 90s, and that is what was, conveyed to me that this was going to be the real way out, and the real way to uh, ascend in terms of socioeconomic status. But I was also half decent at that. It was exciting. It was a creative space. Believe it or not, when I was a teenager and in my high school, I was programming games like a little text-based Pac-Man game, those kinds of things. So I was being creative in that space, and I was showing proficiency in there, and that's really what got me to the U.S., where I studied as a computer scientist and then worked as a software engineer for over a decade.
You must have been good to become an intern at Adobe.
Yeah, I was. They liked me, so they hired me right away. They hired me as an intern twice, and then they hired me immediately as soon as I graduated. So I'm very grateful for that.
Can I ask you what, I don't know, had you been to the United States before then? But
No.
what was it like when you first arrived? And I would imagine this culture shock. I don't know what you had imagined America to be, but tell me about arriving in Oklahoma City. I believe
Yeah,
that's where you went,
yeah.
and how you felt.
It was a culture shock in that I thought it would be a lot more liberal than because I grew up watching Hollywood movies, right? And so I didn't realize how deeply conservative America can be. One of my first exposures was to that kind of culture was Rush Limbaugh, uh, and it just I didn't even know what to make of it. I didn't know this existed, right? Um,
Right.
so that was the culture shock. It wasn't the culture shock of coming from the east to the west like people would normally think, because the reality is I was already a few years into consuming Western culture at that point. The internet had arrived in India, and MTV had arrived in India a few years before that, So my teenage years were built up consuming American culture. I wasn't going to be shocked on that front. It was the conservatism that shocked me.
And you arrive, and what does music mean to you at that point?
Nothing. At that point, it was pure academics. Do what I have to do to keep my visa and get a job.
But you soon move to the West Coast.
Yes, too, because high tech was in full bloom there, so that was where I was going to get my job, a dream job. I have an older brother who was based in the West Coast and encouraged me to move out there. And he was not a musician or anything. He was still trying to find his way himself in the world. And he said, high tech is happening here, and you want to get your job here. That's what moved me out there, and I think it was the best move of all time.
I would imagine the conservatism wasn't as strong in
No,
the West Coast.
no, certainly not.
And so how was that moved for you?
Again, it was kind of I was in my college cocoon where I was just trying, in that headspace, you're not paying that much attention. Some of what I'm telling you is me looking back at my experiences, right? Um, so the move was pretty much, oh, I got to go from college A, try and convince college B to now accept all my credits, and spend months trying to uh, get obscure high school credentials from India to translate into college credits here. So the process and the logistics of all of it consumed me, trying to find on-campus work and just teaching jobs. The normal overwhelming uh, routine of being in college is what was consuming me at the time. So I wasn't paying that much attention to the culture, but I did know that things like the Rush Limbaugh effect and all of this red state stuff, heavily religious, heavily evangelical stuff, had kind of just disappeared on the West Coast. And it was a different scene altogether for me.
So when does music creep back into your life?
This whole time, I was listening to oldies radio as well. And I have to give credit to my college girlfriend, now wife, who was also listening to the same thing with me.
Right.
So we were both out of our minds listening to 50s music. Uh, and not that you weren't listening to pop, because you couldn't avoid it. It's everywhere. You go to
Mm.
Walmart, it's playing. So, of course, we were listening to the music of the time. But I, in particular, loved doo-wop and R&B, and I took to that. And Beatles kind of really took over my life for a few years because I had never listened to the Beatles before. But music from that era is what got me. And when I got my internship and I got my job, I was surrounded by older engineers, boomers, baby boomers, who had grown up listening to all of this live. And they kind of realized through conversations that I had some interest in this. So they were like, yes, this young fool likes this kind of music from like 40 years before its time. So they started feeding me classic rock. I had a couple of colleagues in particular that would bring me music and say, "Hey, listen to this. This is the Blues Breakers or whatever. This is Paul Butterfield." And then that's where the blues starts to get introduced into my life.
And so
And
how do you react to that? What happens when you
I
hear the
love it.
blues?
I love it. I love it. I mean, British blues is what was really what my first introduction to the genre was in a true sense, I think. And I love all of it. I love it. It makes sense given what I already like, right? And you can see how this blues can manifest itself as poppy R&B from the same era.
Right.
It makes sense. Um, and then I was I made my way into the real blues, which is Chicago blues and Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, and that was a moment where I realized, oh, this is really special, and this is clearly where all of this comes from. It just made cultural sense, and it moved me. I was connected to it in a deep way.
You're not playing your harmonica yet.
I am actually playing a
Oh, okay.
harmonica, but not anything like a blues musician would. So the harmonica trajectory is a separate one because my my dad owned a harmonica, and it was I'm trying to remember the brand. I cannot. It was one harmonica that was quite useless. It was just there for if you wanted to play some chordal melodies, and I believe it's called a tremolo harmonica, and I am pretty confident that's what it was. So you couldn't really play nice single notes and all that, but you could play some major key melodies, I think, on this one. And so I used to dabble in that, play some Bollywood. I gave up very quickly when I was a teenager, saying this is not a real instrument. It's more of a toy, which
Right.
most people still say about what I play, but whatever. But when I moved out here to the US, and I started listening to the blues records, and I started listening to the sounds of the harmonica on there. Like I remember listening to a John Mayall record, and he played a couple of Sonny Boy Williamson style cuts on there. I didn't know anything about Sonny Boy Williamson. I thought it was his improvisation. I remember trying to play this stuff and going, what is going on? I don't remember any of this existing on this instrument. And that's what took me to finding David Barrett, is how are these sounds being produced on an instrument that I had rejected years ago, and had no hope for.
Interesting that you still went back to that instrument, though.
Yeah.
And do you have any reason why you would have gone back to the harmonica when you had given up on it?
That's a great question. I don't think anyone's asked me that. I think maybe I wanted to be good at it, and I was perhaps I'd carried this long standing disappointment that I hadn't had the opportunity to flourish on this, and perhaps blues gave me that opening. Now that I think of it, because yeah, what you said makes sense. Why don't I just go with piano or guitar, right?
What do you think? Like, what's your harmonica playing like at this point before you meet Dave?
Oh, terrible.
Can you
I
do?
thought I could play certain notes, but I teach students nowadays, on and off, and now I look back and I go, oh, I was that guy. But I promise you, I thought I was good, right? Which
Oh,
is
okay.
which comes with the territory, is a little bit of the less you know, the more you think you know, and there is an effect that's been well studied. Of course, I'm not saying that's a direct application here, but it's one of those things. You make a few happy sounds on your instrument, and you suddenly think you are very quickly on the way to mastery. And the first lesson with David Barrett kind of reset that whole conversation right away, because he played, and I listened to what he was playing, and I went, oh, okay, this is many, many levels above what I'm playing. And then he asked me to play, and I stumbled within a controlled environment. All of a sudden, I was stumbling and pretty worthless, right? And I realized I have no control and no understanding of the instrument, and this guy does. And so I should just shut up and listen for a long time.
At that moment, are you thinking, I want to be Dave Barrett? I want to play
Not,
like him?
yeah, I do want to play like him at that point, yeah.
And do you think that's even a possibility?
No. He seemed, and he still does. Sometimes when you have a very elite instructor,
Yeah, yeah.
you kind of gravitate towards their uh, musicality, and there's still stuff that he does that to me is amazing, and it's purely him. Um, Technically, he's extremely advanced on the instrument, so I still feel like, oh, I can't play like him, but thankfully, as I've gotten older, I feel like I play like me, so I'm happier about that.
So when you first went to see him and to get lessons, if we go back to that moment where you thought, I'm going to reach out to him and get lessons, what did you hope you would get from Dave?
I wanted a way into the magic of the instrument that I could not comprehend. I understood how a piano worked, right? I know what my fingers look like. I know placing these fingers on these keys make these sounds, and I can extrapolate and say that, oh, if I place more fingers on more, I'm going to get all these magnificent sounds. And there's a whole history of this kind of playing that I can study. So
Right.
it makes sense to me that I could learn that. Harmonica has no such, or at least had no such established history. It was just kind of a folk music form that had become pop, rock, you know. So there's that, and then there is the fact that you can't see anything.
Right.
It's just like, why is this instrument making this kind of a sound when applied to this person's mouth versus me not being able to do any of that? What is happening in their head what's the skull and the tongue and the mouth and the neck, what are they doing to produce all these sounds? So I needed the answers to that, and he seemed to have them.
You're not thinking I'm going to be a musician at
Yeah,
that point.
yeah.
Oh, are you thinking that?
In the back of my head without explicitly admitting that to myself. Because again, the real barrier to all of this was I was still on a worker visa, H-1B visa, and that's a you don't that's you have no guarantees in life when you're on that kind of a visa. You're
Right.
bound to your employer and you're doing what you do to try and get to the next visa. So I never had this notion that I would stop doing what I'm doing and suddenly make a hard pivot into the world of arts. It was simply something I was going to do on the side, and hopefully the world would change around me and I'd be able to pursue it at some point in the future on a more serious level.
Okay, but that was still a possibility.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So at what point does this become a serious thing? Where it becomes a curse or whatever?
I started to get half good, from being no good. I started to become half good because I was applying, whatever little time I had towards that. I actually wanted to or tried to pursue a master's degree at one point, and I gave that up because I wanted to play harmonica. And this was for a period of about a year, and I said, nah, can't do it. Um, I really like harmonica more. So I went with that. So that seriousness had already kicked in. And I was giving it like an hour a day, 45 minutes a day, whatever it was, I was putting in that time. And the magic of practice is that it will yield results. And I started to see some results. And and that gives you more motivation to then get more results. You get greedy for more. And what I started to notice was I was starting to catch the attention of my fellow students, peers, some of the established musicians that would see me at the local local blues jams and stuff. And all of that was confidence inspiring for me. Yeah.
So was there a musician that you kind of not looked up to, but thought that's where I want to go, that's where I want to be?
Not one in particular, but pretty much all of the harmonica players that I was introduced through David Barrett's classes, because he wasn't just a teacher; he was a very good community builder, and he used to organize these annual teaching workshops where he would invite other professional touring working harmonica players, established guys, to be the guest teachers and or guest performers. So you'd have this exposure to people who were not just taking lessons or giving lessons, they were actually playing. That was their life. And so many of them over time kind of inspired me, where I'd go, oh, this guy is doing this really well, and that guy looks cool doing that. So you kind of build this mythical harmonica player that's like a collection, has all the superpowers of all these people that you like, right? And in your head, you want to do a little bit of this and that. So that had already started to happen in me. Yeah.
What do you think it was or it is about you that, I mean, you started, I know you dabbled in the instrument when you were young, but you pretty well took it seriously at a later age, right? And it wasn't like you started playing harmonica at 3 and you spent all your life doing it. You started playing it much later, and somehow you've gotten really good. What is that?
I don't know. Honestly, the really good part, I still always wake up and I question it. All of it is relative. If there's 100 people in the room and you have more skills than most of them, you are really good, right? But if you don't and you're basically par, and all those 100 people, every one of them is equally or better skilled than you, then you're not. Then you're just an average player. And so it so in the harmonica world, I look at really good. I just look at that and I go, I'm okay, and I have to get really good at some point, and I keep that as my motivation, right? But yes, compared to where I was, I have gotten better, much better at the craft. The thing that has always fueled my hunger for it is the fact that I didn't have full scale exposure to music making when I was a kid. And I feel like I've always carried this drive, this angst in me that, hey, if I'd had the shot at practicing 3 hours a day, not because someone was telling me, because I wanted to, when I was 8 years old, I would have been really good. So I always carried that with me, uh, even into adulthood. In my 20s, again, I didn't have time to really immerse myself in practice, but I gave myself those small windows when I could. And it wasn't until my mid 30s that I could really put in some practice hours, right? So I've always wanted to, just never had the opportunity, and I think that's the hunger that was constantly driving me towards success.
So initially, you look at this instrument, you want to learn it, you want to get better at it, and then what was getting better at it? What did that mean? Was it about? I mean, you're obviously an entertainer, you're a songwriter, you're a performer, you're a player, but was it one of those things? Like, was it to? I know that you initially wanted to replicate traditional blues and respect that. Was that the goal? And at what point do you think you got relatively good at it or comfortable with yourself that you were achieving that goal? And then at what point does it become you?
I am still pursuing traditional blues, so I have never stopped wanting to emulate the uh, the legends and the people that have taught me everything, right? And so that's always a constant goal for me. But as far as you know, technically, if I hear a note from a player that is really seasoned and I'm playing the same note and I don't hear the same quality or the tonality or the shape to that note, then I want to pursue whatever technical adjustment I need to make to get that fullness of sound, right? So there is a particular technical pursuit for that. Now, why am I pursuing that note in that way? Because there is a musical reason that adds music fullness to the music that the person made, and I want that fullness to my sound. If there is a particular sequence of notes being played in a certain way with a particular cadence, rhythm, timing, and placed a certain way in a certain point in a song, I want to pursue that. So I have pursued a lot of small things over time that have ultimately built up my playing and my style. And I wish I could tell you there was like one thing that that I wanted to get really good at, or I said, oh, this is what I'm gonna be, or I'm now an entertainer. It's not none of that. It's just small things that I pursued that kind of connected together over time. So even if I'm playing great notes and they're sounding good, do they sound good, or can I make those happen musically in a meaningful way when there's four other people on stage and we are improvising? Do I have that skill? Do I need to work on that skill? Are my social skills good enough to mingle with other musicians and hire them or be hired by them? So there's like a growth that was happening. I was pursuing on all levels here, some without realizing it. And so I don't know how to precisely answer that question about how I got good at certain things
Right.
in the music making. Yeah.
And it's probably not a fair question to ask, but I'm always interested in the artist's take on how they see themselves.
Oh
And
no, it's a totally fair question. It's just that it's quite muddled in my head.
okay, so you join a band, and I think playing in that band was a big thing for you.
I
And
had several bands. Let me just say this. So I had small moments of joining band, not an unjoining band, um, over the years. Some of those bands went away quickly, as most bands do. But I did have one band that I persisted with that was more of a classic rock band, and it was a semi-serious band. So we knew we were just hobbyists at the time, and we played an opening set at a local club for years couple of times a month. But I prepared for that. I prepared for that 1 hour show, right? And that's where I got my stage chops. And I did that for about 3 years, and that led me to being part of a more serious blues, traditional blues band called Tip of the Top,
Right.
which is where I really started to feel like, oh, now everything I have learned can start to be applied in a way that it makes musical sense. I've got musically compatible players who are doing the same kind of thing. And I worked with that band for a few years as well. And I feel like that gave me a good launching point for my eventual musical career.
Which is starting your own band.
Yeah, working under my own name, my own banner, you know. Yeah.
So at that point, how well do you know who you are as a musician?
I don't know. I was still caught uh, in this mind mental space where I had this notion that if I learned enough traditional blues licks or learned enough songs, that I would eventually earn these imaginary blues stripes. Like someone would come and give me a little medal, like you are now a blues man. Like, and I hadn't been, although I was fully aware of it, I hadn't been paying close attention from a spiritual perspective to the nature of blues itself and the nature of what that folk music is, and uh, what it conveyed as part of the the African American journey and uh, condition in the United States was. And so once all those things started to become I started to become aware of these things at a true level. It opened up my perspective to my own music making, where I allowed myself to bring my own cultural influences, my own musical influences, myself into my musical presentation. So there was a change that took place after Tip of the Top, where I started to allow these things to happen.
So when you realize the history of the blues and some of the, I don't know, the deep, where it all comes from the deep South and the black music that it is, how do you relate to that? How do you connect with all that?
Well, in some sense, I am constantly of the feeling that I am a guest into that world, because it truly is black music. It is music that came from African American culture. They are the custodians and the originators of it, and they still carry it in amazing ways through current music. It's just
Mhm.
manifests itself in beautiful, different ways. So I feel like I'm a guest who, just like I'm a guest, although I'm American now, I've lived in the US longer than in India. Part of your mind always goes, you are a guest in a culture that you weren't part of,
Right.
as a young person. Um, so I always carry myself as a student of the genre, um, uh, and not a custodian of it. Okay, and then I have to take charge of the reality that I am actually a performer and an entertainer, and I am a blues artist. So there is
Mhm.
this reality that no matter what I think of myself with regards to the music, I am here doing this. I'm a serious musician. I have seriously pursued it. So now, how can I present my story and my own cultural connection to the music in the best and the most honest possible way, without putting on any facade or any pretentious kind of an image around it? And that's really what I want to be and take away from the blues. The blues is real. It is real music, right? And that's the greatest part of it. It comes from real people, real culture, telling real stories. And so I have decided that as I get older, that that's the aspect I will pursue. I will be honest about what I'm playing, and never be shy to express who I am and how I feel in any given moment.
So I'm curious, As a person who came over and I presume did well in computer science and working for Adobe and being a programmer, um, at one point or another you decide, I'm going to pursue music full time. And I'm going to, I presume, quit your job and become an artist. Tell me about that decision and that process of making that decision. Was it difficult or was it not difficult?
So it was difficult in that my Indian mind would never let go of the job. It was just the sheer terror of not having any guarantees in life because
Hmm.
you're basically walking away from a salary. But the good news is that I was um, working as a very serious part-time musician for many years leading up to that. So it wasn't that I was taking this sudden dive into the deep end of the pool and I had no idea how to swim. I'd been swimming for a while. I knew the process, I knew the scene, I knew the system, and I knew what I was capable of within that. So it was a very gradual kind of ramping up into this world. I would never uh, tell anybody to just quit their job and suddenly make a complete pivot into a world of creativity that they've never experienced before. I mean, maybe somebody would luck out and especially in this day and age with TikTok and all, where you can yield rich dividends from taking a big risk, perhaps it's possible. I never thought it was possible, so I eased myself into this. So it never was as big of a change, to be honest, for me. It was just that a lot of money disappeared. that that was a guaranteed paycheck went away, and so I had to double and triple the hustle. Thankfully, my wife was very supportive during that time, and she said, "Okay, you do whatever the heck you want," because I'd been quite serious about it for a long time, and so that's really how that happened. And there's also the immigrant aspect that I had my green card at that point. Once you have that, you're not going to get thrown out for a for a parking violation or some silly frivolous technicality. You're not going to be blocked at the border for going overseas to play a festival. So
Right.
those kinds of real world uh, issues had been resolved because of the green card, and I felt much more confident that now I can start doing this on a more serious level.
Did you set goals for yourself at that point to figure out what you wanted to accomplish or what you
Yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to do?
Yeah, I
Can
wanted
you?
to do an album. I wanted to play with certain players. I wanted to start hiring the best players I could in the Bay Area, which I'm grateful I've done all of those things. Certain goals I I I thought would play out certain ways didn't play out. Certain other things that I thought were not possible happened. So I did have goals. Some of them were met. Some of them I continue to try and seek. You know.
What surprised you the most? I mean, even though you were kind of gearing up for this and you had been a part-time musician, working yourself to a full-time musician, it's still a very different lifestyle of going to work 9 to 5 to becoming a full-time musician. What surprised you the most in that transition?
In terms of my perception of it, or in terms of
Yeah.
what um, I did not appreciate that if you have to do something on a full-time basis and especially kind of make money at it, you have to. It is a small business, and there's a substantial overhead when you are running a small business. You have to do all of it yourself. Especially now for artists, you have to do every single thing yourself. If I'm producing a show or if I'm collaborating with somebody or whatever it might be, um, I have to produce the artwork, I have to secure the bookings, I have to secure the personnel, I have to engage the audience, I have to do the marketing, I have to do the promotion, I have to prepare all of the music, and then I got to do all the practice and rehearsal and then be the star up front. And then figure out how to get paid and then how to distribute the money, and that's just one thing, and you're doing that hundreds of times. You
Right.
know, uh, so that part became a big reality to me. when I started doing it full time, that hey, this is a business and I can't take any aspect for granted. I cannot take my health for granted. I have to have a certain discipline about it if I have to be consistently good at it.
You mentioned hopefully playing with some of the people you want to play or pursue some of the great musicians you want to play with. I don't know if the members of Greaseland were those people, but
Many are, yeah.
yeah. Tell me about that relationship, because that, I presume, affected your life a lot,
Yeah, yeah,
greatly,
yeah.
and
Those,
changed your
yeah,
life in.
yeah, yeah. So basically, being able to, because I have been at Greaseland Studios since the very early days of Greaseland. Like I going back to, I remember 2008 maybe when the studios maybe just a year into or a year or two into existence. I had done a session there as a test recording to help Kid Anderson kind of calibrate certain, you know, instruments or whatever gear he had procured that day, right?
Right.
So I've been in that environment for a long time, and so I've seen a lot of the players there. But in general, in the Bay Area music scene, just from having been in the jam scene, uh, when I say jam scene, I mean the blues jams, you know,
Right.
that exist here, or just from being part of all these bands that I was a part of over the years, and going to all of the concerts and shows that I visited, and I did time as a merch sales guy for some of the artists that I was a fan of, getting to know them like that. I got to know a lot of the side musicians, the backing personnel, the sidemen, as you call them, right?
Hmm.
And they are elite players themselves. So my goal was, hey, I see this group of musicians working with this person, and I eventually want to work with them. Or if I did a session, I want to hire them at Greaseland to come play on my session. Will they do it? Would they do it without quoting a ridiculous amount of money to work with a nobody like me, right? So do I have the credibility to work with these guys? That was the pursuit. And so being at Greaseland kind of course, helped with that because you get a lot of street cred from being around that environment. And I constantly was, there was a lot of collaboration going on there. Uh, Kid Anderson would always be stopping by my blues jams. I'd always be at Greaseland recording something or recording on some other session or whatever. So um, a lot of amazing friendships and relationships came from that exposure and eventually helped with me being able to form a band and always be able to hire some of the best musicians around.
And also your connection with Little Village.
Yeah, that came about the same way, just from being in that setting and then meeting Jim Pugh. And then Jim Pugh just casually going, "Hey, what are you working on?" And I said, "Well, I got this notion of doing Indian songs that I grew up with in a blues way. I've already done one song. I want to do more." And he goes, "Oh, well, let's make it, let's make it an album." That kind of thing. Just a casual conversation that turns into a whole, different direction in music.
So tell me about the genesis of that idea, and how you came about that.
So I have always liked my mom, and I think I just inherited this directly from her. And she still does it, and I'm gonna see her later today, and she's gonna be doing it. She's gonna be humming some song, and I'll join in, and we'll both sing the words wrong. But it's almost guaranteedly going to be a song from the 50s or the 60s from the Bollywood songbook. And these are eternal evergreen classics. And so I used to do that even while I was pursuing blues harmonica. I'd be singing a little Walter song, and suddenly my brain would switch, and I'd be singing a Bollywood song. And I didn't do this consciously, it was just how I am. And at some point while I was doing this, it was my eureka moment, my bathtub moment, let's call it that. And I go, oh, this Bollywood song I'm singing is actually very blues adjacent in the sense that I can musically make it work in the blues. And so I reached out to the guitar player in Tip of the Top, John Lawton at the time, or at least the guitar player I was working with over the years,
Right.
And I said, hey, what do you think? Can we put some chords around this? And it turned out that the chords were blues chords. There was really nothing more to the song. It was purely presentable as a blues song. And and I said, well, can we record this like this? And we did. And on my debut album, we did that song, and it was a big moment for me where I was like, okay, here's 12 songs, I think, that are blues covers, Jimmy Reed and Little Walter and Memphis Slim and all that stuff. And boom, here comes Lata Mangeshkar song with this kind of a blues vibe to it. Will it work? Will people take to it? How's it gonna be perceived? And generally, overwhelmingly, people loved it. They thought it was a nice little addition to a traditional blues set. And so that kind of sat in my head for a couple of years until the conversation with Jim Pugh happened.
So this conversation happens, and he says, "Tell me what you're thinking," and you tell him about this concept. Do you have any idea what that concept, how it would be received? Even though you had one song out there, a whole album is a different story.
Good question. I did not, and I would be lying to you if I said I did at the time. When substantial time passes, you kind of tend to go back and kind of reassess how you were at the time and all that, and it's a little bit of it's not entirely honest. I really did not have an idea of what was going to happen with it at the time, but I knew I wanted to do something like that. I thought it was cool musically speaking, but also culturally speaking, because it was around 2015 and a lot of political things were changing in the United States at the time, and the culture was getting a little sour. It was becoming anti-immigrant. It was becoming hostile towards people like me, I felt.
Have you felt that
Um, I
personally?
felt it then. I mean, just the current president was speaking hostile things then,
Right.
right? And I was seeing people in the blues world, and people who used to be fans, starting to parrot those sentiments. People who had 1 degree of separation with kind of fall in line with those kinds of sentiments. I'm like, hey, who are you anymore, right? And who am I,
Hmm.
right? And so I wanted to redefine myself and go, no, this is who I am. I can play a little Walter song, and I also have this a whole other side to me that I have kept from you people who seem to be hostile to it. So now you deal with it. Now you see it in its fullest, most majestic way. So there was a little bit of that happening in my head as well.
I wonder. I can understand the idea of doing it because obviously this is your background and this is the music you grew up and love. Was there a part of you that thought, is this a dangerous thing to do? Because I've been working up until this point to establish myself as a traditional blues harmonica player and playing the traditional blues, and then introducing a whole album of not non blues, but Hindi music, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Was there concern about how that would be, or that didn't cross your mind at all?
It did cross my mind, but the reality is, I was not, and I am not a billion streaming or millions of albums selling pop star. I had nothing to lose, to be honest.
Right.
When you're just doing what you do artistically, and it's a true artistic pursuit, which traditional blues is, why not add another artistic layer to it if it's an honest one, right? There's no commercial angle to any of this. It's just trying to refine the trueness of your art form. So as much as I think there was something to lose, or like you said, was there a risk? Yeah, but there was also much to gain. And so I always looked at that and I said, well, what can I gain from it? And I've gained so much from doing that. I have kind of managed to thread this needle over the last decade, and I continue to do that and continue to refine it. And and it has helped me musically. It has helped my singing. It has helped my performance. It has helped me code switch. I can go between George Jones or Hank Williams and to Kishore Kumar to Muddy Waters, and I do this live, and people don't know what the heck's going on, and they love it, right?
So if we go back to that first album that you worked with, how the music you created and what you had in mind of how this would work, how did it work? Did it work easily? Did you think, oh, this is exactly what I had in mind?
Some things, yes. Some things needed the entire group think of the personnel that I was working with. So some songs were easily translated, or I had a very good idea, sense of what I wanted it to sound like. And when I said, this is the song and this is what I wanted to feel like and sound like, it just happened. But some other songs we kind of had to sit and think, "Oh, is this, can you massage this into a blues feel?" Uh, by and large, I picked songs just instinctively that were blues friendly. Like,
Right.
you can't just take Indian music and make it blues. These are just two completely different cultures.
Right.
But enough of Indian Bollywood music has been influenced by jazz and blues going back to, even 40s and 50s and 60s, that you could take a certain a pool of songs and say, let's really bluesify these. And that was the whole mission with that project. So yeah, it's mixed. Some things just kind of worked out nicely, and some things had to be treated a certain way to make them work.
And if I'm not mistaken, Sony Music India heard this stuff and they were interested in working with you.
Totally random. I'd put out two Bollywood albums. At the time, those albums were available on Spotify. They're no longer because of some licensing issues that are above my pay grade that I don't even understand. But at the time, those albums were thriving on Spotify,
Right.
and I believe the talent scout or A&R guy who found them had no idea who I was, and I got a Facebook message from this guy, and I am normally a skeptical person, so I look at him, I look at his handle, and I go, this may be a scam. This may just be somebody fishing for something, and so I didn't take it seriously. I asked a couple of folks. I didn't have any connections in India, but I knew somebody that worked in the Indian music space. I said, "Is this guy? Do you know about him?" And he asked, and he said, "Yeah, this guy's legit." And I said, "Okay." So I get back to the Sony person, and we just went from there. And they were interested in letting me do whatever the heck I wanted, and it was unheard of at the time. So it was really a wonderful opportunity that happened. Unfortunately, right before the pandemic, which was the worst timing in the whole world of entertainment to release anything. So,
But you actually did tour there, right?
yes, I did, but not related to Sony in any way. That was a totally different
Oh,
tour. That was, I do so many local performances in the Bay Area, and including hosting these blues jams, which I sometimes use as a way to rehearse my band. That a gentleman who ran this company in India, this IT company in India, and who was here on business, he just happened to be there, saw it, and said, I'm hiring your band for a series of shows for my corporate events. And so this tour kind of came about. It's an expensive thing to move a whole band from the US to another country and do a bunch of shows. So a lot of kind of accidental, fortuitous things happened around that time, pre-pandemic, that kind of took me to India and then allowed me to release this album on Sony Music.
what did that tour, that experience of playing in India, do for you?
It kind of showed me that what I was doing was unique, even there. Even though I was singing these classics the way we were doing them, because I'm using, you know, an American form of music to present them and doing it with Americans who have played that music for decades. It still has a unique appeal over there, and especially when we played club shows to people uh, in Mumbai, they immediately took to it because the songs were recognizable when we did the covers, the Bollywood covers, but they also appreciated the uniqueness of how it was being presented. So I felt like it was a sign that I could do this over there and be successful. Of course, I was never able to follow up on that, but it gave me like the glimpse of that in that moment when I
You
was
weren't
there.
able to follow up probably because of the pandemic and everything that happens in it.
Yeah, yeah, we just couldn't go there and promote or do anything with regard to that album.
There's a bunch of
And
videos that you did, I presume,
yeah,
and they're great. I mean, if anybody,
thank you.
everybody should watch them because They're
Cool.
very entertaining. And I think you wrote and
Okay.
directed them. Is that
Well, I wrote and directed the first one, Dilruba. Um, the second one, I kind of co-wrote that with the crew because what happened is I did the Dilruba video with this young man Jeremiah and his partner Karina, and they were just this independent crew of videographers, editors that had come recommended to me, and all I wanted was for someone to bring good cameras and shoot a video that I had in my mind.
right?
I didn't realize this guy Jeremiah was actually much talented beyond just that. So I underappreciated his skill set, and he showed me in that shoot that he was very much a thinking and a creative kind of a person, and he had really good skills at this kind of thing. So that Dilruba video turned out really nice, and so when I did one for officially for Sony called Thea Chu, immediately hired them again. And I had a little bit of Sony Music money to spend, so I gave it, you know, it's fair, it's due, and I hired them. Of course, this was a really nice collaboration between us. I had certain uh, mini stories that I wanted to say and convey in the music video, and I got that to happen. The third one, which is Anna, was hugely Jeremiah and Karina's work. Because what had happened was before the pandemic, we had planned out and storyboarded and collaborated on another video that we had all kind of brainstormed and worked on. And when the pandemic hit, we realized we couldn't do anything because you couldn't hire anybody to be part of a music video. There was no
Right.
personnel. You couldn't be in a public space. So I was like, well, what do we do? And they were like, well, we're in, I think, Denver, you're in California. Let's meet in the middle of nowhere where there's nobody, no people, and we'll frame a story around that. And we'll put you in the middle of the desert in Utah. So, you'll be pandemic safe,
Right.
and you'll still be able to get this. And I left it to them to come up with the vision, and they truly came up with a beautiful story for this song called Anna, which
Hmm.
was released on Sony Music. And I'm really glad you watched them, man. I'm grateful you enjoyed them.
They were great. Yeah, very entertaining. Um, so the pandemic happens, everything's on hold, and people are still recovering from it. Where are you at now?
I am kind of panicking to figure because at that point we had thought that we may never come back from this. Like society would have changed
Right.
in a dramatic and a drastic way, and uh, public spaces may not be the same again. All entertainment had shifted to live streaming. If you remember, we were live streaming 3 times a day every day, and
Right.
everybody had the little tip bucket at the bottom of the screen. It was just insanity for creative people or live musicians. I was singing into a camera all the time, it was crazy. So I didn't know what to do. So I started playing drums. I started taking um, drums a little seriously, and so I kind of crafted myself into a little semi-serious, everybody's favorite 10th call drummer. And I'm proud of
And
it.
why the drums?
I think I've always wanted to be a rhythm player, and I love it. I love the sounds of rhythm. It's rhythm and blues, and think I wanted to do that intrinsically. And there's a high barrier of entry to playing drums, I think, in our heads because we perceive it as being this multi-limbed pursuit. You have to be kind of great at doing 5 things at once, which you do, but there's a method to that, and I didn't appreciate that until I started doing it, and I said, this is how you do it. So I wanted to. Also, because I hosted blues jams forever, and sometimes drummers didn't show up, and then what do you do? So I wanted to
Right.
kind of fill in and be useful to the community in those moments. So I pursued drums, and I do play drums now on and off, including for myself playing and singing drums on certain events. And then coming out of the pandemic, I had to just kind of start from scratch again, reestablish relationships, keep the band together. I had a unfortunate passing away of one of my long-standing band personnel, so then I had to find somebody to take their place, constantly making sure I have a bench strength, people who can learn all of these songs all over again. Mostly these are American musicians who have no idea what Bollywood songs are, so I have to get them to learn this songbook over a long period of time. So doing all of that to get back into the live gig circuit. And thankfully now, after a few years since that, I'm back to doing what I was doing before the pandemic, which is playing and singing and keeping the band working as much as I can.
At this point, do you have goals?
I have expectations and hopes. I don't think of them as goals because I have learned a lot about how quickly the world can change overnight. And so I have expectations of myself. I have certain goals of myself personally, but on a macro level, I'm just kind of letting things be and letting things play out the way they do. Because I feel like I increasingly appreciate how little control we have over the world, and so I don't fixate on that too much anymore.
Will you try to go back to India and present your
If
music
if
again?
the opportunity comes up, we actually did go and do this one-off festival in Mumbai a couple of years ago, which was great, but it was too short of a span of time to be there. So hopefully something more will come. Like I said, I don't. It's not easy to take 4 or 5 people from the U.S. and tour
Hmm.
internationally. It's just this, the costs are prohibitive, and any band will tell you that. So until the right opportunity shows up where I can actually do it and do it well, I don't want to do it.
And
Um,
musically, are you still writing actively?
yeah, all the time. Songs come to mind all the time, and then when I stack up enough of them, I feel like, oh, let's do an album. So I just released an album last year, which was kind of built up on that kind of process where I was just little ideas here, little ideas there, and I did it all here in this little corner of the garage. I recorded the whole thing, which is skills I picked up during the pandemic from live streaming, and so I was able to then kind of learn how to mix in a very basic way, and it sounded good enough that my label Little Village decided to put it out, and it got really good reviews. So I'm feeling pretty confident about doing another record when enough ideas kind of uh, find their way into my head.
Did you play the drums on your record?
I didn't on the last one because, again, I'm grateful that I'm working with one of the greatest blues drummers of the modern era, June Core. So it's kind of stupid for me to want to play drums when he's
Right.
doing it, at an unreal level. However, I think on the next record I will, just to kind of feel good about doing it, like because it's a new pursuit and I have gotten okay enough that I'm not embarrassed by my playing. So why not feature it?
Aki, you're an interesting man. This it's an interesting story and the things you've done and continue to do. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, my friend. I really enjoyed talking to you. It felt really conversational, and time has just flown by. An hour.
I
That's
know.
amazing. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you. And I look forward to hearing and seeing more of your music.
Please, please, I hope you are able to catch one of my live performances, and hopefully I can play in Toronto someday.
That would be great. Thanks.
Thank you.